So, my name is Tomasz Dziedzic, and I'm from a company called Linux Polska, which obviously is from Poland. And this is an old name for a company that, well, it clearly shows our roots, but it's no more the case that we only focus on Linux, as you will see. The topic of my today's talk is more like, I came to you not only to share what I've discovered, but also to learn from you. And there are some blanks and things we haven't figured out. And to explain my role in the company, I'm not a puppet engineer per se. I'm more like a person that tries to align a puppet in a more broad environment. And I work closely with clients that would like to implement Puppet as a tool in their infrastructure, actually to figure out how they can succeed. Because, well, so let's start from explaining the title maybe. When I say patterns, what I mean by this is not the bits of code that I will show you that implement certain stuff, more like a ways to approach a certain problem, and more like a ways to achieve a goal, more like an organizational goal. And to be honest, if what I mean by enterprise in this particular case, for the purpose of this talk, is we specifically target as companies from financial and telco sectors. And my first question, because I've noticed that polls are quite popular today, is who can raise a hand and identify themselves with such definition? I mean, like, I'm from financial sector, I do stuff for telco. Okay, so there are some of you. And don't get me wrong, everything I will show in a moment are my opinions and the way I see reality, so your perception may vary. But what I would like to hear from you is it the case in your situation? Are those your challenges? And have you run across those problems while deploying Puppet, and maybe how you approached it and solved, if you have already solved this problem. So, for me, and this is by all means not a way to depreciate, well, I take it as it is. Those are my clients' challenges, and I'm there to help them. But to summarize, I would call it those companies have typically heavy processes, or those are not emerged, not named processes. Although there are some ways to do stuff, they can't really tell how it all happened and why they do it this way, but they strongly feel that this is the way to do it. And this is what I call a hidden process. There's also a conflict of internal goals. The larger the company, the more pronounced the conflict is, for example, between departments. If the company has like a large internal development department, they have usually quite different agendas than the operations guys. There's also a difficulty in communication, and I will refer to it later. And the way I see it, it's becoming more and more pronounced. There's a crisis of faith in a big name tools like the companies that sell integrated suites of management tools that are supposed to manage everything. And those companies are looking with some degree of envy towards tools like Puppet, for example. And, well, there are, of course, the regulatory challenges, but there's a will to change it, and there's this simple notion to get things done, not to overcomplicate stuff, just straight to the point, show me how I can achieve my goals, and I'm not necessarily interested to create another state-of-the-art thing. So when customers approach us, or when we approach customers and we discuss how they would like to do it, the most common recommendation from us is to start from the ground up. So start with the basic pieces of infrastructure and move up the stack and packetize all the way. But funny thing is that more than half of customers that actually asked us about this technology, they envisioned it as a way to automate the deployment process. And well, the way we kind of try to discourage them, because it's quite, well, high goal for someone who has no prior experience with the technology. But well, if the client actually demands it, we have no other choice than to try to help them as best as we can. My question is, how Puppet started in your cases, given that you have a similar situation, like a large, complicated organizational structure and many internal agendas and so on. Can anyone share? Did you start from ground up, or just you had a goal to deploy a certain application and you just went straight to this goal? So more like a ground up, or more like a...
My name is Dziedzic. I'm working for a company in the financial sector. I met most of the challenges you described, and we are now in the phase of talking. Communication is difficult. It's a long process. So we are very slowly starting to show Puppet internally, and more and more to involve more and more people in the process. Very slow. We are very at the start. They do recognize everything you say.
Okay, so it's nice to hear that we are not special in our territory, I guess. And our companies are more like, well, the average, I would say. I mean the good meaning of average. And the other cases are continuous deployment. And this is mostly the case when the company wants to streamline their web frontends. For example, a bank who has, like most banks today, has online presence, and they are pushed by business to deliver features more rapidly. Developers, of course, are very happy to comply. They probably have their own continuous integration framework in place, and they are pushing more and more updates to operations. And the last one is DevOps, although not very popular. We have the first kind of inquiries from customers, how we recommend to approach this. But for me, DevOps is mostly a communications scheme, I would say. So tools are kind of on a more distant horizon. So how we try to help customers survive the implementation in such environment. First of all, we abuse Git however we can. And this means putting everything into Git. This means, well, the only way to your Puppet master is through Git. There's no other way, and it's enforced actually. We force everyone to use Git, but this not necessarily means that black screen and green letters. There are different ways to actually enable users to leverage this technology. And we, of course, build workflow around Git. And the workflow actually highly depends on the customer. So, and this varies from very simple workflows to very, very complicated workflows, which are not so effective in my opinion. So the other thing is, since customers are not so fond of a feature that allows Puppet to auto-enforce configuration on environment. They are even kind of against such feature. So the default way of using Puppet in such production environments is to report on changes and enforce on demand. So instead of focusing on the change deployment and implementation part of Puppet, we put most of our effort on the reporting capability of Puppet. Because what freaks people from such organizations out is lack of knowledge about what the tool is actually doing. So what we're trying to do is we try to gather every piece of information that we can make use of later. And I will show you examples how we use those informations. We analyze everything, or at least most of the things that we can. We visualize what's important and provide relevant information. And when I mean relevant, it usually boils down to the person that's a recipient of the information. So, as you can imagine, in financial large organizations, there are a lot of departments, a lot of tiny, narrow roles. I mean, tiny in terms of like a scope. There are people that are interested only in a single aspect of how the infrastructure is actually doing. So, well, the other thing is we try to use cutting edge, which means the latest but the most useful software. So HiRA is, well, a standard in our operations in such scenarios. Roles and profiles are useful. Well, in such occasions, we usually advocate for using of Puppet Enterprise, and there are a lot of reasons to do it. And well, we are actually eyeballing the separation or the keeping of HiRA data in modules, because this is useful for us to reach yet another goal that I will discuss later. And actually, what we're trying to kind of have always in mind when we work with clients or develop tools around the work we do for clients is the holy grail for us are modules that don't require customizations. And what I mean by this is the best possible scenario is that you never have to touch your modules. Like the perfect scenario would be if you could buy them from the vendor of the module, and the vendor could provide you with updates or security updates or whatever is necessary, and all the customizable parts, bits are outside of the module. You never have to worry about the situation where you did some changes to the module and the actual update will break your own code. And the other stuff is auditing, because on many occasions, actually clients told us something like this. Oh, okay, the Puppet is a really great tool, but I have a certain use case that I'm not quite sure what to do. When the auditor comes and he asks me about something, you really don't have a tool to report over his questions. Like simple questions like, show me the changes that relate to a certain type of resource over your infrastructure, like what kind of users you added and removed, what kind of roles changed, or show me all the authorized and unauthorized changes over a given host or service over the period of time. So, as I mentioned before, this is mostly our focus. So, what we strive to achieve is to be able to recreate the whole life cycle of changeset from the conception to the actual withdrawal or removal of the change from the infrastructure. And there's also a quite common notion, like it highly depends where the initiative lies within the company. And on numerous occasions, we have these talks like, the guys have usually already chosen the tool, which is not Puppet. And since there are tools that are more well, developers favor them more, in my opinion, I guess. And operations guys would love to use Puppet. And I think this boils down to the situation where Puppet kind of well, talks to them well, it's like they understand the concepts more easily. They can grasp them more easily because, in my opinion, developers tend to think by the flow, like do this, then do that, and they would like to structure their change management tool like the program. And operations guys, they are interested in having a certain state, and this is where actually Puppet is quite, well, they favor it on more occasions, I guess. So I guess in a perfect world, it would be like a DevOps comprised of two tools. I don't know if it will ever be the situation actually that developers use the different tool. They push actual code, and it is somehow magically translated to a code of another tool. But who knows? We don't know what might happen within a few years. Okay, and well, Puppet is easy for Puppet heads, and usually in companies there are like one or two guys that are very Puppet savvy, and they usually started using Puppet community, and sometimes they even have like 2 years of experience, and they tell me, well, we deployed Puppet like 2 years ago, but I feel like we've hit the wall of it. Like, I've written bits of manifest for almost everything I could imagine, but if I had a chance, I would start over again. And this is kind of funny because this is a repeating theme, and I think that for the, well, most rest of us, or most rest of them, or for most people that are not so inclined to actually understand how the Puppet really works inside, are those ready modules that you could use for actual technologies that you deploy in infrastructure, and some tools that will even more abstract the concepts and streamline the way you use it. And actually, to use a real-life example, I had a customer that actually expected us to do everything through Puppet Enterprise Console, like, and we strive to actually integrate as many operations, daily operations he has to do through the console as we could. So you can see where I'm getting with it too. It's like there's a class of users that are actually not so inclined to learn Puppet so much. And this is not the problem of a client, it's more like a problem. There always will be some people that are very proficient with Puppet within the organization, and the rest of people that you still have to get involved in the process. And for them, you need some ways or tools to make it easy on them, because the whole change will be traumatic for them, I guess. And so why make it harder on them? Okay, so what we've discovered is the most important and critical part of what we do. Well, customer trust. Because honestly, Puppet is not a tool that you can make a great show around it, and not especially for managers. Like, okay, you can show like the screens of letters flowing through, and the technical guys are thrilled, but managers are like, I don't know what just happened. Even though if you, like, on their eyes, materialize the half of their infrastructure, it still kind of not necessarily makes them impressed. And this is where this trust comes in, like they have to trust you to allow you to actually build the solution. And knowledge transfer, because as I said before, there usually are like, there's one or two guys that actually made an effort to learn the technology. Sometimes they implemented it, but if they want to be successful on a larger scale and within like a somewhat limited time frame, they must spread the knowledge on a larger scale. Like probably they won't make it by themselves. And well, this is where the training comes in. This is where kind of workshops and different knowledge transfer strategies come in. And modules for relevant technologies, because, I'm not kind of confabulating here, like, I'm asked about modules for Oracle's technologies, IBM's technologies, and, well, as you can imagine, there's not much choice out there for those kind of modules. No. And seriously, those customers have those technologies, and this is the reality we must actually address. So, to be more specific, well, workflow. And this is the simplest of the workflows. I specifically call the guy P developer, not to confuse you that he's not a programmer that creates an application. He's a guy who actually creates a code that will deploy your infrastructure. And, well, I've mentioned earlier that we gather a lot of information. So, for example, what do we gather? Well, we gather Git logs and comments, and well, as you can imagine, since we bolted Git to the Puppet to create a broader tool, this is a very wealthy source of information. But you must understand that what happens in Git is not it's like deploying change set into production is like a two-stage process. First, you must envision and develop the change, and then you must deploy it. And it's not like a binary state, like either you have the change or you don't. This workflow can be in various states along the life cycle of this change set. So we also gather Puppet master logs, which seems obvious. Puppet run reports. Well, this is the most common source that you look into when you try to figure out what's going on. But we also use file buckets because we will kind of archive every version of a file that we've managed over the life cycle of the resource. Compiled catalogs, because when you write simple manifests, it's quite easy to understand what will be deployed to your production, but well, you must understand that you will substitute facts and you will kind of, well, make some conditional decisions, and this is where it dims somewhat. But if you have modules and you use hierarchy, it's next to impossible actually to understand what will come out of the module. I mean, what kind of catalog will be compiled, since there are many things that are, well, in the process. So compiled catalog is actually the most, the best reference and you should actually compare it against the Puppet run report, because the compiled catalog is what was supposed to happen, and the Puppet run report is what actually had happened. And of course the facts, which probably can change over time. So, but why actually, well, why put so much effort into actually keeping this information? So, first, what can we extract from this information? We can actually extract the information how the change set was conceived. So, who were the developers that actually created the code and committed to the Git? So who will review it, who approved it, who actually moved it from one environment to the other, which in organizations that I refer to should be the role of a person probably called the release manager or something similar. It's not necessarily the technical role, it's more like a person that coordinates the effort of actually moving new features into production. Okay, so the other part is that when you have your changes, when you have your code in your repository, it doesn't mean that it is applied in your production, even though it is in your working environment. And even though, well, it should be applied to the host, it doesn't mean that those hosts actually, well, they picked up the change and they applied it successfully. So this is a very interesting problem where the release manager actually confirmed that he or she wants those changes in production. The release window is supposed to give us opportunity to implement them. But the next question is, how did we do? Or was it successful? Did we deploy to every host that we intended, and so on and so on? Or if we didn't, why? And what's the range or scope of our problems? So basically, we would like to know what's the current state in every possible moment that we have these questions of a change set. So this might be like one patch or more patches or changes in different parts of infrastructure. And we would like to be able to recreate the whole life cycle, like to be able to go back and tell where the change originated from and why it was created. So the other aspects are what was the exact state of manifest during given run? Because, as I mentioned earlier, you should compare the compiled catalogs against the logs from the Puppet run. So you can be interested to compare how the facts reported by your infrastructure changed over time. You could be interested in actually tracking how the hosts evolve over time. And this can be useful from many perspectives. You would like, for example, to compare what was the nature of change in a file, especially when it comes to unauthorized change. Because Puppet can enforce a certain file contents, but what was the contents before, and if it was not deployed by Puppet, who made this change may be hard to identify through this means, but what was the nature, the contents of the change. So, and what can we visualize then? Because those are important for street operations guys, the people who do troubleshooting, for example, who are responsible for the ongoing operations and fixing stuff and making fast tactical decisions. But for example, managers or people that need a broader view, we must visualize. We can't just feed them raw data or some narrow aspect. So from the same information, we can easily extract pace and trends of different aspects that change. For example, we could visualize how the given change set progresses over its life cycle. So the manager wants to quickly see, okay, so the change set number, whatever, what's the state of it? So the state it's confirmed, it's within the release window, and it's like, well, half of the infrastructure successfully applied the change and half didn't. This might be useful in the crisis situations when you have to kind of like make quick decisions and hopefully base them on some useful, actionable information. Okay, so we can, and the configuration drift, which means, it can mean many things, but usually in this case, given that we try to keep a tight grip on what we put into Puppet, should be unauthorized change for most. Okay, so also what can we report over? So mostly those will be reports over time, and they can be useful for exercises like, for example, learning from experience and from what we've done recently, like in process improvement. They can be useful for planning, they can be useful for stuff like capacity management. So we can report over different aspects, like show me the activity of a person that commits to Git, or of a person that is responsible for like promoting the change to the different environment. Show me the stuff that happened on a certain environment, show me the stuff that relates to host, a certain resource, or a certain fact, if you are that much curious. But what would be nice to have actually, and this comes from discussions with our clients, well, nice thing to have would be, usually if something goes wrong, the most challenging part is the Puppet run went smoothly, but you still have a malfunctioning infrastructure. So it would be nice to be able to correlate the actual service logs from the service that is hit by the problem with a change that recently applied to this service. So this will streamline the troubleshooting effort. At least we hope so. This will streamline this effort and help you, well, at least narrow your scope. And if you had an actual change that you, even though you tested it, there's always a change that it will not work as predicted in production, so you can act quickly. And the other is an aspect of monitoring. Sometimes the changes influence our production in an unpredictable way, and probably the most hard thing to troubleshoot are either things that don't seem to have a connection with some event or reason, like they appear and disappear on some erratic rules, or on the other hand, you can have a situation when you have a sudden resource utilization spike, and you don't know what's the cause of it, and you would like to troubleshoot because this impacts actually your production capability. So those are the kind of our efforts to visualize some of the stuff. This is our way towards better auditing tool. Well, we've created a tool around a popular log analyzing system, and we can visualize different aspects of what I've mentioned with this tool. And we can also drill down and see the details if you want. So challenges. Well, we've run across some challenges, and those are still not solved for most part. So how do you authorize in multi-role environment? This boils down to someone else being responsible for ION underneath our infrastructure, someone else providing or taking care of all operating systems, someone else taking care of middleware, and yet another person actually deploying applications on this middleware. And there are guys that do backup and restore. There are guys from the storage, networking, security, and in some organizations, every one of them actually logs into the system and make some changes. So, and they would like to be in control of their domain, like enforce on others that they can't deploy a certain change and have like autonomous environments, repositories for themselves. And this is an issue actually, well, this is for a whole different presentation, I guess, or discussion, because, well, but this is real, and kind of there are different ways to approach it. We try to create a solution that we apply few, like more than one environments to a certain environment. It sounds strange, but we are experimenting with this approach. And yeah. And there's also an issue of Marionette Collective. Although a very powerful tool, it is somewhat fundamentally different from Puppet in the way you kind of think about leveraging the capabilities of Marionette Collective. In one way, it perfectly kind of fills the gaps that Puppet has in its features, but on the other hand, it has very destructive capability, and in our case, when we try to build this this workflow around Puppet, it kind of evases our effort to incorporate it into the workflow somehow. So we're trying to come up with a set of policies or rules how to, when to use it and when not to use it, because effectively, well, one good thing about Marionette Collective, when it's properly configured, you have a closed catalog of actions that you can actually make with it. But on the other hand, you'd like to have the whole picture, like what was made through Puppet and what kind of actions were actually delivered through Marionette Collective with one complete insight scheme, when you actually see what is happening. So this is yet another, and I think this is a huge potential and another challenge. Okay, so what we are up to. So please check periodically our GitHub accounts. We recently started sharing what we are doing. Those are not the pieces of code that I've kind of referred to. We started with something else, but it actually uses Puppet to deploy a web application firewall based around open source tools like Mod Security, for example. But we are in the process of actually building a process inside our team that will support people that actually care about what we publish. So we must learn the open source way, I guess. Like not only take but also give, because this is a very responsible kind of a role. It doesn't boil down to just posting something, I guess. And we expect not only to publish what we did with workflows, but we have plans for some of those mentioned enterprise technologies. And I guess those will be, well, on the schedule, kind of, it depends how customers will kind of force us to create those. And since our focus is on, well, Linux and open source related technologies, but the enterprise ones, so the natural fit will be Red Hat's product, JBoss middleware, and you can imagine what we deal with on a regular basis. But we have, as I've mentioned, we have specific questions about the availability of Oracle or IBM or other companies based modules. Okay, so, well, I don't want to stand between you and the dinner, I guess. So, are there any questions or something you would like to share given the talk that I just presented?
So, you talked about compiled manifest.
Well,
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
How did you extract that to look into the platform?
Well, I might be not, well, let me repeat the question. The question is how we actually get our hands on compiled catalogs. I can't be very specific on the details since I'm not the one implementing this, but the way I was kind of shown is that this is a question of configuration, and you can ask Puppet to actually save the catalog, compiled catalogs for every round for you, or we just grab them and analyze them. Okay, so thank you very much.